Welcome to Unmasking the Mic. My name is Ralph Anthony, current stand-up comedian and actor living in New York City. Each week I'll be sitting down with a fellow comedian to discuss how they navigate the world and how being in therapy helps aid them in that journey. Thanks for tuning in. Now let the unmasking begin. Welcome back to another episode of Unmasking the Mic. I'm your host, Ralph Anthony, and this week's episode is the second part to our interview with Pete Stegmeyer. Pete is a New York City-based comedian and is a veteran of the U.S. Army. So buckle up and enjoy. Yeah, it's pretty wild how people, they just want the quick fix, you know? Essentially, if you keep quick fixing something, it's just making the problem worse. And eventually it's going to keep steamrolling. One issue will steamroll into the next issue, into the next issue, into the next issue. And then it becomes a full blown situation where somebody blows the gasket and something happens. And then it's like, well, what were the warning signs? It's like, here are all the warning signs. Nobody wanted to acknowledge it, you know?
Well, that was one of the things, like in the Army, like you have to, because suicide in the military is rampant. Like it is far and away our biggest killer. Like more than like any of the wars in recent memory. It's absolutely the number one. And so you have to do all this training, but the training is god awful. Like usually you're sitting in like the chapel or like wherever meeting space, and you have like this like volunteer like basically telling you, and the only things they tell you, like they tell you how to look out for the warning signs of suicide, not the warning signs of mental health struggle. And so they're like, hey, if one of your buddies starts giving all his stuff away, call the chaplain. And like, no, like if somebody is that far gone to where like they've thought about this, like take them to at the very least the emergency room, and like don't abandon them. And they did say like don't like leave people alone and stuff like that, but they never tell you how to recognize that things might be getting to that point. And again, in the military, it's a very difficult situation because like another indicator of mental health is like eating well, and everybody in the military, like for the most part, has an eating disorder, or at the very least, you're either binge eating because you didn't get your last meal because you had to do some training exercise or you went on patrol or whatever, or like sometimes you're skipping, like sometimes you won't eat for a day, or like it's very erratic. So all the baseline signs like sleep and diet and hygiene and stuff like that, they get camouflaged, like pardon the pun, by the day-to-day life of the military. And I think that's honestly, combined with the high stress environment, why so much of this is such a problem.
Yeah, it's only going to get worse too. I feel like it's just really only going to get worse. And it's just funny how obviously we're both comedians, we're fans of stand-up, how George Carlin had a joke where he talked about the language. And one of the things that he talked about was the transformation of PTSD. Because originally PTSD was called shell shock.
Yeah.
That's what they called it. And it was such a dramatic, it's shell shock, like it hits you in the face, like it's just two words, shell shock. And now you add in all these extra words and these hyphens, and it decreases the meaning. It waters down the emphasis of what people are going through. So, I will probably keep saying this, but I applaud you for getting the help that you needed and continuing to help after you left the military, and applauding your wife for helping you on that journey. I think that it's a big step because you left an environment, you left a culture where it's filled with toxic masculinity, it's filled with stigmas, and it's filled with just rampant mental, emotional, and physical abuse. And you chose to go the other route. You didn't buy into what they were feeding you. And I think that that's huge. I think that that's actually absolutely huge. And the fact that you take these situations that you were entrenched in and now talk about them on stand up, that's like some next level stuff. As a comic, you want to be, I almost feel like you want to struggle with getting to the next level in the sense of the material that you want to talk about. It shouldn't always be easy, because if things are easy, you're dealing with really just fluff stuff. You're really just dealing with the fluff of life. And
Exactly.
the fact that you talk about what your struggles were and what you see in people, I think that that's phenomenal, man.
Thank you. I think I have a good anecdote for. Let me stick a pin in that real quick though, because I just wanted to say one thing, and I don't say this very often as a comedian, but I think that Carlin got that wrong, like when he was talking about like the shell shock and stuff like that. Um, and what I mean by that is because yeah, you're absolutely right that like shell shock, like in the 40s, like um, used to be called or PTSD was called shell shock. I think in like World War One, they even called it like battle fatigue and things like that. So there have always been different names for it. Ironically, though, battle fatigue I think is a better name than shell shock. But I like that it's called post-traumatic stress disorder now, because it at least lets you and other people understand like what it is. And you're like, okay, this is, a reaction to traumatic stress that I have encountered. So this is like, I think it makes it a little bit easier for people to understand, okay, this is the cause and the effect, and maybe like there's something, because shell shock like doesn't sound curable, but post-traumatic stress disorder is cure, or it's manageable at the very least.
Mm.
And I think the more that we know about that, and the more that you can kind of destigmatize that, because also like shell shock, like it sounds scary. um and I think that the more that you can create a language around that and get conversations going, like you're gonna, the more air, the brighter that fire can go. But yeah, and with respect to like the second point that you made about like talking about like my stuff on stage, I think that really ties back to like that, just riding the waves that the universe gives out vibe. Because for years in my stand up, I didn't mention the army at all. Yeah, I refused to. Like even like, and I started stand up in the army,
Mm-hmm.
but I refused to talk about it at all, because part of me was like afraid of getting pigeonholed as like, oh, he's an army comic, like. And it's the same reason like I don't really want to do like America's Got Talent or something like that, because I'm afraid that the producers would like try to like wrap me in the flag and like play some Star Spangled bullshit, and like try to make up like a story. Like my story is very compelling on its own. Like I started doing stand-up comedy around trash can fires in Afghanistan because we had no form of entertainment, and it was the only way that we could like take our minds off of shit for a little bit.
Holy
Like
shit.
that was like definitely a big part of it. Like I loved stand up all the time, but like I didn't think I was going, like I didn't have any plans of doing it until I did it, and like would tell like funny stories, and then people started asking like, hey, like can you do some more? And so I kind of like started riding that little wave and doing more stand up that I didn't think I'd ever do. And then I got out and I'm like, okay, I don't want to. It was very important for me to like not be an army comic, because I felt like I was going to get pigeonholed, and like I didn't want to, like it just wasn't a niche that I wanted to be in, so I refused to talk about it.
Mm.
But then after a little while, I'm like, okay, like start speaking to your experiences, like because the army is ripe for material, obviously, because it's a significant part of my life. You travel, you have unique experiences, you meet the biggest personalities you'll ever meet in your life. Of course, you should like be talking about it. And so I kind of feel like that is tied back to like the riding the wave situation. Like I had no idea that I was going to do stand up. I literally started doing stand up comedy in the army because I was like telling jokes to like and like stories to people around a trash can fire in Afghanistan. And they're like, oh, like this is super fun. Like, let's do this again. And I kind of just started going that way, but I didn't want to be pigeonholed as an army comic. So for years, I wouldn't talk about the army. Like I would do jokes because I'm like, oh, okay, like I should just go in the direction of stand up. And then after a little bit, I'm like, no, these are rich experiences. And I started slowly bringing up like some of the funny stuff from the army. And then I noticed something at shows where every once in a while, like people come up to me after and be like, dude, thanks so much for saying that. Like nobody understands like the crazy fun stuff that like, the funny things about the army that I would like talk about that like nobody gets that, but I was like dying. And then I'm like, cool. And that's another wave to ride. And then I started kind of talking a little bit about my mental health and like, you know, the fact that like just at the time, like even just saying I have PTSD, like it was kind of like, no, I can't say that. I don't want to say like that was like brave or anything like that because I don't think that it was, but I know a lot of people weren't talking about that. And I started kind of slowly doing that because that was my experience. It wasn't because I was like trying to do anything. Like I just figured I'd make like, you know, a little PTSD joke about like having like my short-term memory loss. But something kind of amazing happened after that where like it went viral on Reddit. And I can't tell you how many people like reached out to me on Reddit, on Twitter, on Instagram, and were like, dude, thanks so much for saying that. Like, you know, I've been having memory issues too. I never thought it would be PTSD. And they would go get checked out and they would get helped. And that's the big wave now. Like that's one of those things where like if I can do stand-up sets and then I don't like I like the laughter. The laughter is great. But if I get somebody afterwards that has said, you know, hey, this has like encouraged me to like, you know, go talk to somebody, or I didn't know this was right, but I didn't know this was weird. You know, that's the thing that like really like means the most to me. Like I've had a couple people tell me that, you know, they were having like, you know, self-harm thoughts and then now they're connected. Like I've been able to connect them with organizations, the same ones that I use, like Headstrong Project, to get therapy. And like I check in with them. And it's like one of those things where I would have never guessed that this is like where things were going to go, or that I would be a stand-up comic, or that I would be talking about this. But those waves are where all of the opportunity has come from. Like I had a TV network reach out to me about like possibly doing a documentary series because I talk about like my PTSD and I use it to advocate other veterans to get help. Like that was never in the game plan.
Mm.
Like, but if you trust the universe and you trust the process and you go with the flow and you speak your truth and you make the things that feel right to you, then, you know, you're you're always going to get the most fertile soil on the fields nobody else have planted before. So do the things that you want to do and reap those benefits.
You heard it here first. That's an amazing mindset to have. And I almost feel like the people that come up to you or the people that would comment on your Reddit post, I think those were little signs from the universe to keep nudging you along, to keep pushing you into that uncomfortable space of talking about it. Because a lot of times I think we have this mindset where we think it's only happening to us. And then once we start having that shift where we talk about it and we have instances where people come up to us, then it's like, well, if I can talk about this, why don't I talk about something else? Why don't I talk about this other thing? Because if I'm going through it, chances are somebody else is going through it. And I think that's the magic of the universe. And like you had said, you keep coming back to it. And I think it's a very powerful thing. It's just riding the wave of the universe, just trusting that everything is all linear and that it's happening for a specific reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and you have to still do the work. Like I still have to when I'm writing my jokes, I make sure that I'm like careful because, I am still trying to put out that vibe of I'm not an army comic. I am a comic that was in the army, but I'm not an army comic. Like I'm not Larry the Cable Guy for veterans. I'm just a guy talking about experiences. And some of them you'll relate with deeply. I hope you relate with most of it deeply, but I also don't want like my stuff to be exclusionary. Um, I would never want to be like a comic where like, oh, I don't understand anything this guy's saying because it's all army stuff. Like I try to make it so that everybody finds it funny, but some people find it meaningful.
Yeah, I find that is very beneficial to think like that. I know for myself, obviously I wasn't in the army, but I have a lot of experience with drugs. I had quite the healthy drug problem for many years. And so I just talk about it because I think with all the pressures that everyone's under, whether social media, job, work, whatever it is, I think people are out there. There's more people suffering than there are people that are thriving. And I think just talking about it, it just brings it to light. It doesn't make it seem like it's such a stigmatized thing. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where, you had the onset of the DARE program, or you had the Brain on Drugs commercials, and it was very much anti-drug, but it never addressed the situation of, well, why would somebody want to escape?
Yeah.
And so
Thank you.
yeah, I very much like where your head is at with this. I think it's a very, very powerful thing that you're doing and embarking on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Dare always pissed me off so much. Like he's like, yeah, like you should tell school children, like, hey, like probably don't do cocaine and heroin. But they spend all this time like demonizing like pot and stuff like that. And now like the irony is I'm a war veteran and the thing that Dare was telling me was the devil is the only thing that helps me like sleep peacefully at night. Like I guess not the only thing, but it like helps with that. Like it's funny now that is like considered medicine, but they're still trying to push like this, like it's like the gateway drug. Like yeah, it's the gateway to like 8 hours of solid sleep at night. Like and like anything else, like when like I still don't know what ginseng weed is. I heard about it for years and Dare. I couldn't point it out if you like showed me a garden. I have no idea what that is. Or like peyote buttons. I was like 8 and in Wisconsin, but I think you're 100% right that they make it feel like the drugs are the deciding factor and not the the environment which requires escaping. Yeah, and that's the story of all of our shit. Like they've all figured out that it is way easier to sell cures than prevention. And so that's what they try to do.
Yeah, I think it really boils down to the fact that marijuana is not legalized on a federal level. So hence it's not taxed. It's not grown by the medical companies that are tied into the government that provide the prescriptions to keep people all medicated. I think this country personally, and this is a whole subject for another day, but it's all just a big scam. The medical world in America is such a hustle that they demonize things that people can actually benefit from because they can't make any money off of it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I'm of the same mindset, man. One of my biggest fears is if I have to travel, if I'm on the road and I get to a destination and I forget to pack my weed, whew, that is a stressful night. Let me tell you, oh boy, I won't have a panic attack, but it will certainly fuck with me for sure. I need it to sleep. I have back pain, I have shoulder pain, I also have just a whole set of mental gymnastics that I go through when I try to go to bed. So it's like,
Oh,
I totally get where you're coming from. I totally get it, man. Now, you've been in therapy, you said in the beginning, for 5 years. What's a bit of advice that you would give yourself, let's say 6 years ago? Because I'm sure that the problems that you had 5 years ago when you got into therapy were there 6 years ago. So what's something that you would say to your younger self now after going through therapy?
Oh, that's a great question. Man, that is a great question. I mean, I think the first thing I would say is go go earlier. I mean, I'm personally of the mind that you should, like, even if you're not sure, like, do I need therapy? Like, you probably do. There's something that you need to fix. Like, it's kind of it's kind it's kind of like, I mean, like you said, like your body is a car, right?
Hmm.
And you've got all these different things, and like, yeah, like mentally, like you might not have depression, you might not have, PTSD or whatever, but how are your relationships? Like with like romantic interests and like, family members and friends. Like, um, there's always, there's never not something that you can improve with therapy. And, you know, like that would be my first thing is like go to therapy before you need it. But then also, I think a lot of people, I know my wife experiences this as a therapist herself. People think that sometimes going to a therapist is a cure all for everything. And that's just not the case. It is extremely helpful. It is probably the most helpful thing you can do, but one therapist can't fix everything. So come up with some realistic goals about what you want to, see change. And that's, I mean, that alone is a huge, having the emotional maturity to understand that. That's actually, that's another good thing I would say is like go to a therapist and work on emotional maturity, because chances are, like, if you think everything's fine, like maybe things are good, but like, is it also that maybe you don't have the emotional therapy or the emotional maturity to understand, how things are going? Like maybe things aren't as good as you think they are because like you're not picking up on, some of the subtler clues, or you're, let's see, I guess my best advice for this would be figure out what it is that you want to work on and find a therapist that whose goals and like strengths align with your needs and weaknesses.
I love
And
it.
then you can like work together on some great stuff. But you can't, like, I can't go to a couples counselor and be like, hey, I want to improve my relationship with food because I either binge eat or I forget to eat for like 3 or 4 days. Like, she she probably won't be able to help me, certainly not in the way that I need. And so you have to, like, there's specialists, there's things, and if you're not sure what you like need the help with, then maybe that's what you need help with, is like understanding emotionally, like what those things are. But you're always treat yourself as both a masterpiece and a work in progress.
I love that. I love it. I think that that's a phenomenal answer because it's a truthful answer. It's an honest answer. If and you really hit the nail on the head, whether you realize or not, right in the beginning, when you said if you're thinking if you need therapy, chances are you need therapy, because that's the telltale sign. If you're having these conversations with yourself already, chances are you should probably have them with someone else. Obviously you've been in therapy for 5 years and you are coming from the military. You started while you were serving. Now, given the stigmas that you were already going through in the military, were you open enough to talk about it with your family? Did you tell them like you were in therapy right away, or did you hold that back from them?
So that is a really good question. I'm gonna, like, with my wife, I was very honest with her, because obviously, like, a she knew that I needed the therapy and was the one to direct me. And she'll be like, how was your session? And I do this with her as well. I'll be like, how was your day today? Because like sometimes in therapy you're going to have light days, you're going to have heavy days.
Mm-hmm.
and you might not know going into it like how it's going to pan out for that day. And so like I would like say with my wife, I'm like, yeah, today was a good day, or like pretty light, or whatever. And I never say exactly like what I was working on, because that is a special bond between the patient and their therapist. Like just like she never tells me what her clients have been talking about, but sometimes she'll be like, hey, I love you, but I can't, like, I need to be alone for like the rest of the day to like decompress or like whatever. So like we set like boundaries and expectations of that with each other. But like with my parents, that was a little different, because like my parents mean very well, and like they're great people, and I feel like when I say they mean very well, like that didn't come out right. But they're older, and so they kind of, and like both of the families are like kind of quiet and stuff like that, like my mom's side and my dad's side of the family. And so they're not very emotionally mature, and they're not aware, like they think things are fine, because for them going to therapy meant something was wrong. And it doesn't always have to. I don't know, like for them for a bit, like they grew up thinking that therapy meant that you were broken, and so it was like a shameful thing. And like I remember like my mom, when I was like 14 or something, I was having like normal 14-year-old anger, like angst issues, and I went to like a therapist like once, and she thought that I would be fixed after one session because she just didn't understand it. But then B was like very nervous about like who's going to see us going into the family therapist's office and stuff like that. And so now I try to just be really open with them. I'm like, yeah, I had therapy today, or hey, I've got to let you go real quick because I'm going to be calling my therapist in a little bit. And like so they've kind of, I think they were afraid of therapy because they didn't understand it, because it's something they've never done, or at least I am not aware that they have ever done. And I think that's what a lot of the issue is just a fear of the unknown. And like, so now I just kind of talk about like, when like a little kid falls over and there's that like pivotal moment where it's like, do I like rush over and like pick them up and help them? Or do I just act like nothing happened? Because like the way the kid reacts is going to be based on like whether they think like they can be getting pity and like possibly a juice box, or if it was like, you're not hurt, that's no big deal. Like within reason, obviously, like a little, you know what I mean? Like if the little kid like falls and hits their butt on the cement, like not like if they're like grievously wounded. So I kind of do that, and I act like everything's normal because it is. And now they're kind of like, okay, yeah, like, do you have therapy today, or like whatever the thing is. And I think that's helped a lot. And I've kind of like also told my mom, because I've worked on a lot of stuff from like my past, because over the 5 years in therapy, like it's not all been like PTSD. A lot of that has been, examining my relationship with the idea of family, and, how I can be better at relationships, like both as like, a husband and, potentially a father one day. And like also just like as a friend, because it's just, yeah, like there's a lot of different stuff to work on and like improve. And so my family's been really good about it now, but it took a while, I think, for them to destigmatize that. And not like, I don't think they were stigmatizing me. I think they were like, just the idea of therapy to them was stigmatizing. And now, but now I'm like, just like, it's like a regular doctor. Like dad has to go get his blood sugar checked sometimes. Like I go and like get checked out too.
Yeah, I think that is a very and I hate to say it, I think sadly that's a very normal response for families, because I know with my own explaining it to my parents, I held off. I didn't say anything for probably almost like 6 months. And when I first brought it up, I brought it up to my mom first, and then I told my dad probably like a month or two later. But initially it felt to me like they felt like they had failed, and that goes along with the stigma. And I think the more people break down these barriers and talk about therapy, it becomes part of a natural conversation. Like you just said, your dad goes to get his blood sugar checked, you go to get your brain checked. You go to get your heart checked, you get your soul checked. That's all part of what it means to be in therapy.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I did also try to let them know, like, this is not like a failing on your part. Like, you didn't like screw up. Like, you like, because both of my parents, like, their parents were not great. And like, you guys like did amazing considering like where you started. And so this isn't like in any way an indictment on your parenting or your compassion or your care. Like, this is just, things are better now, and like you can go do this. And I think kind of just explaining that, that happens now is kind of helpful. And I think a little bit, like, after they were good with it, it kind of brought them a little bit of peace as well, because it's like, okay, like, he's probably going to be fine. And like, I don't think they were like narcissistic enough to be like, this is my fault. But I also get it. Like, if I mean, I get mad or I get sad sometimes if my girlfriend or my wife is upset, and like, I know it's like not like anything that I did, but I want to be able to make her feel better. And I know sometimes I can't do that just because, you know what she needs at that time. So I get that, but it's also like, you have to develop the language and the communication skills to go and say, like, I love you, but I need space right now, or whatever it is. If you can communicate effectively, and that's really what therapy is, it's communicating with yourself effectively,
yeah,
then you're good.
I could not agree more. And I think that that open communication is so key for any relationship. I think it's so key. And being in therapy helps create empathy, not only for the world around you, but for yourself. Creates empathy, that it not sympathy, because it's completely different, but empathy to the struggle that you went through, the environment that you grew up in, the daily nuances that you might have to go through now. So it helps frame it and put it in perspective and allows you the space to talk about it. I think that's a very powerful thing. Very powerful thing.
Absolutely, because empathy, like, I mean, think about like our parents and us, and like the disconnects that we have. Like, when I think about like the fact that my parents were 30 years old, or like late 20s, and they had 3 kids, and I'm like, of course you made mistakes, or like you were doing your best, but good lord, you're 28 years old. What were you
Yeah.
like? And it's like the same things, like, where they'll be like, well, I can't believe that this hasn't happened, or like, you haven't done this. And it's like, well, the world is different now. Like, but it's like, it's different both ways. And like, that empathy like really helps improve those relationships, because like, I see like what my parents went through, and I couldn't imagine. I'm 37. I couldn't imagine having a kid right now.
No.
Like it, and like, and you did that 3 times. Like, what is why? Like, I'm happy, like, for like that they did. And I know it was like a different time, but it's like, my God, like, what you must have, like, the stress you must have gone through. I have 2 relatively healthy pugs that I could like leave alone whatever I want. And like, and I still feel like overwhelmed sometimes. Like, how do you fucking do anything?
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, by the time my dad was 30, so I got clean off of drugs when I was 34. And by the time my dad was 34, I was born. He divorced my birth mom and had been a single parent raising a child while working a full-time job. And like, the amount of stress that that man had gone through, it's, it makes you appreciate, really truly appreciate what our parents sacrificed for us. Because
Oh, absolutely.
growing up, I think we all think that our parents are terrible people. Oh, you suck, I never want to be like you. And now I couldn't imagine putting one foot in one of my father's shoes. Like, if I could, I don't know, I'm in the process of becoming just a step parent, and I can't imagine, I just can't imagine being on that journey, being a parent, a full-time parent all on my own, And so the biggest compliment I could ever give my father is telling him, if I am half as good of a father as you were to me, then I think that would be a success, you know, because that's why your parents become your role models, because they teach you, all these things. And
Yeah, 100%. And then absolutely. I look sometimes at like my dad's parents or my mom's parents. I'm like, how the hell did you come out capable of love at all? Like, because my grandparents are awful people, and like, and yeah, it's one of those things. But like now, like that reflection has made that relationship with my parents so much better, because it's like it's a mutual respect now. Like these relationships grow. It's not just like, oh, mom's gonna call me and tell me to eat vegetables. No, mom might drop some serious shit on me about like trauma that she's experienced in her past, or about how the fact that like when my brother was like, she was like 8 months pregnant with my third brother, my dad got laid off and had to work literally like 2 hours away. So we would drive 2 hours to this factory, work 15 hours, drive 2 hours back, sleep 4 hours, and then do the same thing to like until we could like move closer to like this thing. And then on his weekends, he would like work construction. I'm like, holy shit. Like how, like, and like those are the things that you don't know as a kid, because they like try to protect you, and then like for them to think that they failed because you go to therapy is just not fair to them or you.
yeah. Yeah. Now,
I gotta call my parents.
yeah, you gotta call your parents, man. I think I want to get off this and call my parents too. Well, Pete, my friend, we have come to the final two questions of the interview. They're two of my favorites. If you could describe therapy in one word, what would it be?
Ooh, that's not the word. One second. I would say iterative.
Okay.
And just to expound on that, like that's my word, but iterative, like, because I do like computer programming and like security programming and stuff like that. It's a continuous cycle, and you just get deeper and deeper, and you take the skills that you've learned from coping with or your PTSD, and then you can apply those to other things, and then that unlocks new worlds to explore with those tools, and it's a continuous journey.
I love it. I love it. I think therapy is definitely a very continuous journey. For sure. For sure. And my last question is, if you knew somebody that was thinking about getting therapy, they were debating on seeing a therapist, what's a bit of advice you would give them?
Well, first of all, I would say do it, and I would tell them, go in with managed expectations. And what I mean by that is have a couple ideas as far as what you are hoping to gain from therapy, or to shed in therapy, or whatever your end goal is from therapy. Like have an idea, maybe like have an idea, but I always say choose a distance and a direction, and then see where it takes you. Say, these are the things that I want to work on. Find somebody that like, lines up with you. Again, like make sure that, you're dealing with somebody who is experienced and specializes in those areas of therapy that you want to work on. And then just, yeah, have a distance and a direction, and check back from time to time and make sure that you're still going where you want to go. Let the universe kind of carry you a little bit, but then also keep those expectations in mind, so that you have those milestones of progress. And I'm sure you'll get to a point where you have, you know, other things that either pop up, or maybe you've completed the work on something that you wanted to get out of it. But I bet by the time that happens, you're going to have a few more things that you want to work on.
Hmm.
You know, so just be open to it and go there with an idea of what you want, and then just kind of trust the process to get there. But at the same time, if you're 6 months into sessions with somebody and you're no closer to, you know, having that, if you're no closer to making progress in that kind of situation, like, say for example, you're scared of the dark,
Mm-hmm.
like that. I mean, I don't know if you would go to therapy for that, but like, just as a basic example, if if you haven't really done any work on that in those 6 months, or you're not any closer, it's not like, okay, well, like, you know, try a nightlight or whatever the, you know, metaphor would be, you know, then it might be time to find a different therapist. Like, it's okay switching therapists because they don't meet your goals isn't indicative of failure on your part. It means that the relationship with your therapist wasn't a fruitful one, but, you know, you're taking a step to do something good for yourself in finding somebody that's more aligned with your end goals. And so that's kind of the thing, is like, if you're not, like, maybe you won't make exactly the progress that you want because therapists aren't miracle workers. But if after a little while you find you're nowhere closer, then it might be time to reevaluate and do that, and kind of let your therapist know that as well, and be like, you know, this is really something that I want to push towards, and kind of go, because there's so many therapists. Well, I won't say so many, but because pretty much every therapist I've had has been really, like, good and kind and hardworking. But there's definitely people that are willing to just let you, you know, like, run bits on Skype for 45 minutes so they can bill your insurance. Like, there's people that will let you treat the session as an open mic, but are you getting anything from that?
Yeah. Very well said. Very thorough.
Thank you.
I love it. It's a lot of food for thought. A lot of food for thought. And that's what this is all about. Open conversations, comedians and therapy. Well, Pete, I want to thank you for coming on today. And I want to acknowledge you for getting the help that you need and continuing to aid yourself in this journey through mental health. So thank you for coming on today. It has been a pleasure
Of
speaking
course.
with you.
You too, dude.
I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us on this mental health journey. My name is Ralph Anthony, and this has been another episode of Unmasking the Mic. We'll be back next week with a brand new interview. Until then, stay present, stay in the moment, and keep your head up.